Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Melee's Turn Wheel, where today I am going to be talking about, yes, you read the title correctly, all of the games that I played in 2023. I am a lunatic, I'm aware, and I don't know how many people are actually going to give a shit and listen to this, but I need an outlet to talk about this, so I'm going to do it here. Now, if you're relatively new to listening to the podcast, you might not be aware of this, but I last year did a bonus episode where I talked about my top 5 games that I played in 2022. Now, that was fine for that year. I had played very few games. I think it came out to be about 14, if I'm not mistaken. And I really didn't have much to say about a lot of them, at least not enough to really fill, a good amount of time. But this year, I played significantly more games. I ended up, technically, at the time I'm recording this, I have not finished the last one, but I'm very, very close, and I know roughly where it's going to go. So I am starting this a little bit prematurely just to make sure that I can get it all done in time. But I have played 30 games this year, kind of 31. I finished 30 games this year is what I should say, which is a lot of games, especially considering that some of those were quite long. I really wanted to, and I still want to, kind of focus on my game backlog and trying to polish down, because there are so many games that I'm like, I'll get to this eventually, and I just never do. And I really wanted to change that this year, and I want to keep doing this going forward. Probably not going to make it to 30 again next year, but, maybe. We'll see. I guess it depends on how long the games are. So, I played a lot more games, but that doesn't necessarily mean I have a lot more to talk about, right? Well, that is true. However, in looking through the games that I played this year, and which ones are going to be in my top 5, and which ones are not going to be in my top 5, I realized, man, I really want to talk about some of these games, like in more extensive detail than I did when they came up in the, what am I doing this episode section of the main episodes of the podcast. And I could have done a top 10 or maybe top 15. I just thought, why not just do it all, get it out of the way, because there are some games on here towards the bottom that I think were interesting to talk about. I'm not going to be spending a super extensive amount of time on all of them. And plus, I like ranking things. I like making lists. I like organizing and kind of categorizing things by my preferences. So yeah, I figured it would just be a fun way to have an excuse to do that. Now, of course, not all of these games were released in 2023. In fact, let me just count up real quick how many of them were released in 2023. That's one. That one was not released in America until 2023, so it counts. That's it. I got 2 games. Three games. And we'll talk about all of them at some point or another over the course of this episode. So I am going to be splitting this up into 3. I'm pretty confident I can get this first one out before the end of the year. I'm not really that confident that I can get out the second and third parts before the end of the year. So it might just be this one to start off with, and then the next couple are going to have to come out in early 2024. That's fine. Again, I do know where that last game is going to go roughly, so I don't have to worry about it right this second. Yeah, so I think, that's pretty much enough beating around the bush. I hope you guys enjoy. If you are interested in trying out any of these games yourself, maybe don't listen too extensively. I am going to include timestamps of all the games that I talk about in the description of the episode. So if I'm talking about a game, and I'll try to give spoiler warnings, and I won't talk about anything too crazy. But if you'd rather go into any of these games completely blind, then you feel free to skip around or to skip the episode entirely, whatever you want to do. So, and then one last thing. I did play one other game this year that I'm not going to be talking about because I dropped it. I only dropped one game this whole year. All the other ones that I started and intended to finish, I did end up finishing. And the one that I dropped, I'm just going to briefly mention it. It was the original Resident Evil 4. which I know is kind of crazy. Actually, a couple. Resident Evil 4, the Harvest Moon Wonderful Life remake. I also tried to get into that. Wasn't really vibing with it, to be honest. But that one's not really as interesting to talk about, so whatever. Resident Evil 4, though, I know is like a beloved game, and I can absolutely understand why so many people liked it. I didn't really mesh with the gameplay. It was you can tell, and like, you know, if you know anything about if you have even a passing interest in game design or watch like game design YouTube videos, and this game has almost certainly come up because it's like a masterclass in game design according to a lot of people. It's designed to be intentionally clunky, so as to like not. It's all about like power dynamics, right? Like you as the player are supposed to feel disempowered by the controls, so that it feels like, you know, you're actually in a scary situation. Basically, that's the gist of it, and the explanation for why it would be in a horror game. I think that that's cool, and I like that idea. It just wasn't very fun for me, so I ended up dropping the game. I made it all the way through chapter 1, so right up to the big boss in the lake, which fucking sucked. I did not like that boss. But overall, though, I mean, like it was okay. Like I had a good time relatively. It just kind of I was having a hard time getting into it. I might come back to that one at some point, and if I do, you know, maybe I'll mention it in a later episode. But for now, that game is officially dropped TM. Yeah. So other than that, we can go ahead and get started talking about these. Now, obviously, there are going to be some games that I have towards the bottom that you might be a fan of, or some games that I have towards the top that you might not be a fan of. Of course, all of this is just my opinion, and you don't have to listen to it if you don't want to. And if I'm talking about a game that you don't like, or that you do like, and my opinion is different than yours, feel free to disagree with me. Leave a comment or reply on Twitter. Yeah, do whatever you want to do, basically. Just don't be a dick, essentially, or I will block you. Really, just that easy. All right. So starting off, we're gonna have number 30, my least favorite game that I have played this year. That game is The Legend of Heroes: Trails of Cold Steel 4. I've talked about Trails pretty extensively. It is the only game series for me right now that is in contention with Fire Emblem for being my favorite game series. There are a lot of games in the series. There are 12 total. Only 10 of them have been localized in English and are playable in English, either officially or unofficially. Some of these were localized unofficially long before they were ever localized officially. But long story short, there are 10 games out right now, and I played all of them. I have spent most of like a good chunk of this list is just Trails, because I played the I think a fifth of this list is Trails. I think there are 6 games. I played most of the series, or sorry, I played the first few games in the series across like 2021 to 2022. And then 2023, at the very, very beginning of 2023, I beat one Trails game. And I'm counting that, and it's included on here because any game that I beat in 2023 is fair game. But then and then like the entire back half of the series, Cold Steel 1 all the way through to Reverie, I played in 2023. So get ready for a lot of Trails, and they run the whole gauntlet too. Some of the Trails games are near the bottom, some of them are a little bit higher up, and then some of them are near the top. So we'll see how that goes. But Trails of Cold Steel 4 is my least favorite game in the series by a pretty wide margin. It is probably like bottom 5 video games that I have ever played. It is genuinely so fucking awful. I have no idea why anyone thinks this is a good game. It's just so fucking miserable. I will give it some credit, some things that I like about it. The gameplay is really good. I don't actually think it's my favorite gameplay in the series. Towards the end, especially with like Brave Orders and things like that, they started to introduce some mechanics that I'm not particularly fond of, and I think maybe add a little bit too much, like too many bells and whistles to the combat. I think they kind of hit the sweet spot with like Cold Steel 1 and 2 is where my, like, I think the gameplay is probably the best personally. But I certainly think the Cold Steel 3 and 4 gameplay is also pretty good. And the music in pretty much all of these games is phenomenal. I think some games have better soundtracks than others. I think Trails of Cold Steel 4 has one of the better, is on like the higher end of that. Really, really phenomenal soundtrack. Beautiful art. The game looks gorgeous, and like the character designs are generally really, really fucking good. Overall, like a lot of things about this game to really like. What brings it down and what makes it one of the worst games I've ever played is just how genuinely awful the writing is. Both like the plot and overarching story, combined with the absolute nothing characters. Like they're just so fucking boring. It's and Cold Steel 4 is noteworthy because it brings back a lot of characters from older games in the series. So not only do you have like the Cold Steel characters, which arguably were never really that good to begin with, but you also have characters from the Crossbell games and from the Liberal games, the Sky games, and they get hit with the no personality stick really badly. It's like seeing characters from Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, or Thracia and Genealogy. It's like seeing these beloved characters and then you throw them in Awakening. They're the same characters, except now they have like Awakening tier writing, and it's just they're so boring. And that's to say nothing of the characters introduced in, especially Cold Steel 3 and 4 have like some of the worst characters in the entire series. Not that they're bad necessarily, just that they're so bland and so nothing. They just like don't do anything. They all stand around in a circle and like talk about the most generic bullshit you've ever seen. There are individual exceptions. Like there are moments I really like for all of these characters, and ultimately I do think Cold Steel 4 has some stuff in the writing department, particularly early on in the game in what they call Act 1. Genuinely really great writing there, and I would have liked to see it continue throughout more of the game, but unfortunately it just didn't. I didn't want to get, like, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but there is, I'll say, a big plot MacGuffin that gets introduced in Cold Steel 3 that is not properly fleshed out until Cold Steel 4. That is one of the single worst pieces of writing in all media that I've ever experienced. It's so fucking bad. It robs the characters of so much agency, and especially the villains. Like this series is obsessed with making villains like they're evil, but they're doing it for good reasons, and maybe they're not that evil after all, and maybe they're not like as in control of their own actions. And it's just a fucking like Cold Steel 4 is not the first game in the series to have these problems. Plenty of other games have bad characters. Plenty of other games have bad stories. Plenty of other games like have try to do this with their villains, all that stuff. But I think Cold Steel 4 is a culmination of everything that makes this series awful. It's like, like they took all the problems with all the games, especially the more recent ones, but all the games, and they just condensed them into one ball, and then that's Trails of Cold Steel 4. And that's what you have to look forward to if you make it through all of Trails. And like, I gotta say, I really hope, this doesn't turn people off of the series. I do think that Trails is a phenomenal series from almost beginning to end. We'll talk about, all the ones that I like, or all the ones that I liked that I played this year, of which there are several. But towards the end, it really does start to get kind of mediocre. And in the case of Cold Steel 4, quite bad. If it's any consolation, if it makes you more interested in continuing, the game after Trails of Cold Steel 4, Trails into Reverie, is quite good, and is one of the ones that I'm going to be talking about this year, that I enjoyed. So we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, Trails of Cold Steel 4, not a very good game, and I hope that they really move away from this direction going forward and actually have characters be interesting finally again. All right, time for, I was last year's episode where I did, the games I played in 2022. No Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem was not mentioned once. Now we're talking about Fire Emblem pretty much right off of the bat, because we have everyone's favorite Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. I am almost done with the whole series. The only game in the entire series that I have not beaten at least once at this point is Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem. I have beaten Fire Emblem 1 It was 3 years in the making. I started this when the game came out in December of 2020. In fact, that I talked about it in the first episode that I did of this podcast. Is that it got announced that it was going to be coming out on Nintendo Switch to buy, and I played it. I bought it and I started playing it, and I was like, man, this game fucking sucks. and that was pretty much all. This year I did push myself to get through all of it, and it sucked basically from the beginning to end. Once you get warp, then it's like fine. You're basically just done with the game at that point. There's really not a lot that I can say here. I don't really like NES games in general. I think NES games for me are pretty boring. They tend to be rather clunky. I don't really like the controls. I think the game design is usually very, very spotty in places. And this game is no exception. It's very menu-y, very clunky, and it's just not a very fun game to play. The remake is better in every conceivable way. If you don't like Shadow Dragon, that's fair. You are entitled to that opinion. However, if you try to argue that this game is in any way, shape, or form better than the remake, or that you should play this instead of the remake, you are delusional. I promise you. I guarantee, first of all, that you have not fucking played this game, but also you are delusional. That's really all there is. Considering that it is Fire Emblem, I was hoping that I would have more to say about it. I mean, obviously, I'm going to talk about Shadow Dragon eventually, so a lot of the big pieces are there. Are going to be talked about there. I do think it's interesting how much they changed for Shadow Dragon, in like pretty minor stuff too that doesn't really ultimately matter all that much. Like the Garneth map, I remember had like Garneth is like all the Garneth clones are around the throne, so it doesn't matter like which one of them is the real one. It's very bizarre. I don't really know what they were thinking with that one, but anyway. It's worth playing for the novelty of seeing where the series began. Outside of that, really just not worth your time, in my opinion. Gaiden is still worse, actually. I think this game is better than Gaiden because it actually has competent maps, but it is easily, without question, and by a very wide margin, my second least favorite game in the series, only above Gaiden. All right, we had a nice little break there, but now we're going back to Trails. Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel, not 3. I actually have a little bit more of a gap here. It's the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 2. Now, this one might actually be a little bit of a hot take, because I know people who don't like the newer games who do actually think that Trails of Cold Steel 2 was the last gasp of the series being good. And I don't agree. I think Trails of Cold Steel 2 was, in a lot of ways, almost as bad as Trails of Cold Steel 4. It's not as bad. It's definitely like a very big gap between 4 and 2. But I did not enjoy 2 whatsoever. So really what it boils down to for me is like, you look at like the formula of Trails of Cold Steel, right? And if you've played the series, you would know like kind of what the series is about. It's like a series of JRPGs where you like go around, and like all the countries are all the areas in a country you kind of like explore. There's usually an emphasis on the geopolitics in each area, and Trails of Cold Steel is no different. But in Trails of Cold Steel, they also introduce some like more slice of lifey Persona style elements. I mean, first of all, in Trails of Cold Steel 1, you're in a school setting, and same with Trails of Cold Steel 3. And very, kind of focuses more on like that teenage life aspect, alongside the horrors of war. And alongside that came like an increase in cringy humor that I didn't like, and generally just like conflicts that I think feel contrived. But I do think that the school setting, especially in Trails of Cold Steel 1, was pretty endearing. I think it worked well. I think the minor characters that it introduced you to there were very fun. I don't want to get ahead of myself because we will be talking about Trails of Cold Steel 1. But basically, Trails of Cold Steel 2 was like, what if we took everything that was bad about Trails of Cold Steel 1 and then took out all the parts that were interesting and charming? And all the characters, some people think it's 3, which I definitely think it gets worse in 3. But Trails of Cold Steel 2, if you ask me, is where they start like butchering the characters. They're like no one has any personality in this game. Reen is okay. Reen is the protagonist. Reen is a fine character in this game. Some of the villains are actually kind of nice. I like several of them. But all of the I guess I don't even want to call them like supporting characters. They're like major characters. They're class 7, Reen's classmates, and they're so fucking boring, man. They're just absolutely nothing characters. After several of them, not all of them, but several of them were like genuinely pretty cool and interesting characters in Cold Steel 1. And I was willing to see like how that would play out. No, they just decided that they weren't gonna be interesting anymore. So yeah, I mean, nothing really to add here that I haven't already said. I do think that if you are a Trails fan and you've played the whole series, you might be surprised to hear that this is kind of where I started to draw the line of like, I don't really think the series is good anymore. Or again, until the newest game, then I think it goes back to being good. But yeah, Trails of Cold Steel 2, not a big fan. Definitely better than 4. Has a lot of elements that I like. The story into, I will say this, the story into is not that bad. It's not great. I don't like it very much, but it's fine. It's not like the absolute dumpster fire that is Trails of Cold Steel 4. So it has like a very noticeable leg up in that regard. Okay, next up, game that I had not heard of until like I actually don't even remember where I got this game. I think it was in one of those like bundles that they do on like sales and stuff like that. They're like there's these websites that like have deals. It was like, you buy this bundle of 10 games for you can buy this bundle of 10 games for like $10 or something like that. And I think this is where I got this one. It's called Her Story. Or sorry, no. It's called Telling Lies. So Her Story is a game that was released in 2015. It's called Her Story, and it was released by a person named Sam Barlow, UK-based writer and video game director, and it seems like they then went on to form a company or a studio called Furious Bee Limited, which then went on to make Telling Lies. I think that's what's going on here. Her Story, just to deviate from that a little bit, that was one of the games I played last year, and it was pretty good. I liked it. It was genuinely a nice little entertaining story. It was like a mystery story. Basically, the gameplay is you're given like the task of figuring out like what is the story is even about, and basically you can search keywords in a computer, and then the computer will show you video clips that have those keywords in them, and then if you watch enough of those, like you start to uncover more keywords and search for those keywords, eventually you'll figure out the story and what's going on. So Her Story, great. I really enjoyed that one. Telling Lies is very similar. Here's the main difference, though, and the reason why I liked Her Story and not Telling Lies is that Her Story, I can bring up Steam real quick. I can tell you exactly what the problem was. Yeah, okay, so Her Story, my playtime after finishing that game was 2.6 hours. Now, Telling Lies, my playtime after finishing that game was 6.1 hours. So it is effectively twice as long, and it's I still think it's a pretty interesting story. I think it's a fun little romp. I don't want to give too many details, or really any details, because figuring out details is the point of the game. I definitely think it is someone's cup of tea. It is kind of my cup of tea, but I wasn't a big fan of it here just because it felt like it was dragging on a little bit too long. I think if it was maybe like 4 hours or 5 hours, and okay, it can be like 20 minutes if you know what you're looking for, if you do things in the right order. So obviously, like, your playtime is going to be very different depending on the order you do things in. So to make things a little bit more objective, how about we look up how long to beat? That's probably a good metric as any. All right, Her Story, how long to beat? Main story, about 2.5 hours. So that's basically what I got. almost exactly, actually. And then Telling Lies clocks in. Okay, so maybe I was just bad, because Telling Lies clocks in at about 4 hours. So maybe that was just me. Maybe I just suck. I will say, Telling Lies at Completionist is not Completionist, because there are multiple endings. I only got one ending, and I just looked up the others on YouTube. Let's say main story plus extra for Telling Lies is 7 hours. That's a little bit closer to what I got. And then her story, for main story plus extras, is only 3 hours. So that makes the difference a little bit more pronounced. Yeah, I don't know. It just took me a little bit longer to beat than I would have liked. It took me a little bit too long. I should mention here, though, that we are now entering the territory of, like, these games are okay. I want to make that very clear. I did not dislike her story. I did not dislike Telling Lies. It is a fine game. I didn't have a lot of fun with it, but I really like the concept, and, you know, for being 6 hours, right? Like, it's not that long of a game. So, you know, like, it was fine. I have generally kind of no opinion, maybe like slightly leaning towards negative. But I like what they were going for here. I really hope that they continue to make more games, and I'll probably continue to play more games that they do, or that this person does. I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's one person or not, but yeah, overall, not bad. I'd recommend her story over this, but it is what it is. Yeah, so just to reiterate that, like, the only games this year that I played that I disliked were Trails of Cold Steel 4, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, and Trails of Cold Steel 2. Every other game in that I talk about right now, and going forward, is a game that I thought was at the very least okay. And I feel the need to really reiterate that for some of you guys, because next up we're talking about Fire Emblem Engage. Alright, so Fire Emblem Engage, the newest Fire Emblem game, one of the only games that I played this year that was actually released in 2023, and oh boy, was it a video game that I played this year. That's it. That's really all I have to say about Fire Emblem Engage. I did promise you guys that I would do like a whole episode dedicated to Fire Emblem Engage. I decided not to do that. The reason I decided not to do that is because I was like, I need to go in and I need to play the game a second time. It's not fair to, like, you know, I was playing very suboptimally. I didn't really know how the game mechanics worked. Maybe if I went in with a fresh mind and, like, better game knowledge, I would have a better experience. I started a second playthrough and then I stopped and didn't finish it because I was bored. So, yeah, I mean, take that as you will, right? Like, I could not even finish a second playthrough of this game. Obviously, I will eventually play it a second time. If not any other time, when I get to it for the podcast, I will have to play it a second time. That'll definitely motivate me to keep going in it. But, man, it's just not that interesting to me. So the gameplay is solid. I don't actually think it's, like, the best gameplay in the series or anything like that. I think the maps are very middle of the road. I think certain game mechanics are cool. Like, I like the break system. I think that's a lot of fun. But I also think that the changes they made to Fog of War were super fucking obnoxious. I think the emblem ring system is cool, but maybe could have been fleshed out a little bit more. I mean, I didn't really engage with a lot of the mechanics in ways that, like, I just kind of got bored with them pretty easily. So maybe if I had went back and given them, like, a fair shake, maybe I'd be singing a different tune. But the gameplay was good. Certainly, it was not bad by any means. But it was not really, like, blowing me away or anything like that. And just about everything else in the game I don't like. I think the soundtrack is solid. It's certainly solid. Like, I don't think it's a bad soundtrack. But I don't like it a lot. I think the art style is gorgeous. Oh my god, it looks amazing. The character designs are awful. And I'm sorry, if you like the character designs, that's fine. I think they have a very distinct whimsical charm to them that is different from most of the rest of the series. And I honestly, I think that's good. The games should have different character designs. I think each game's character designs sort of bring a unique flair to their atmosphere. And I think Fire Emblem Engage's character designs, this is really the big takeaway. Fire Emblem Engage's character designs fit with the tone and the atmosphere of the game really well. So from that perspective, I think they're quite good. But just like aesthetically, for me, I think most of them look very ugly and stupid and bad. Not all of them. I think Vander is really cool. Vander is my favorite character in the game, simply because he's the one that I think looks the coolest. And I just don't like any of the characters in this game. So that's really the only metric that I can use to judge it. I think the writing is so lame, man. Like, all right. I am a Three Houses nerd. I know I'm not one of those people who's like, yeah, Three Houses is so much better than Engage. It actually has like a deep and compelling story. Three Houses' story kind of fucking sucks too. I can't lie. It has so much wrong with it. There's so much stupid bullshit. Half the routes don't feel finished. Honestly, I'd say all the routes don't feel finished. The characters act very sporadically at times. Overall, just like not a very well written game in a lot of ways. But what they had there, and that was actually good, was really, really good in my opinion. One of the best casts in the series, first of all, but also some really cool plot ideas that were not expanded upon or executed in a way that was particularly great. But they tried, damn it, and it just didn't feel like they tried here. It really just felt like they were like, okay, we're going to do a funny, silly, campy story, which is fine, except it's not funny or silly or campy. It is campy, but not in like a fun way. You know, people, I've talked to people who are like, yeah, I really like this game's story, which is fine for the record. You can like this game's story. It's no problem if you do. But I've talked to people who say, yeah, you know, it was dumb fun. It's like, okay, that's fair. I don't see it, but that's fair if you really feel that way. But for me, it's like, is it dumb fun or is it just dumb? You know, like to me, when I think of dumb, silly, goofy, I think of, and I haven't actually played this game. It is on the list, but I haven't actually played it. I have seen clips of it though. And, it's the SMT Fire Emblem crossover, the Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE, is kind of what I think of when I think stupid, dumb fun in the series. And it's nowhere near that level of bullshit camp, and like goofiness. So I don't know. It's a fine game. Again, I don't dislike it. It's not even in my bottom 5 in the series. It's not even. It's like barely cracking the bottom half, to be honest. Like I like it more than 1, 2. I certainly like it more than Thracia. I like it more than Revelation and Birthright. I think then I would probably do Engage. So yeah, somewhere like just outside the bottom 5. It's a fine game. I enjoyed it for what it was worth. I don't really have any desire to go back, and I don't really see the appeal that a lot of people saw in it. But if you are an Engage fan, I don't want you to think that I am shitting on your favorite game, and that I'm a Three Houses cuck that only likes stories if they're like morally gray TM. I'm fine with silly stories. In fact, we're gonna talk about one. My second favorite game of this year was everything Engage could have and should have been. Damn it! But we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there. Yes. So that's my Fire Emblem Engage rant out of the way. Eventually, I may talk about Engage in more depth, especially if I ever do go back and finish that second playthrough before I get to it in the podcast. I would probably spend some time talking about it then in maybe a little bit more depth. But for now, that's all you're going to get, and that's going to have to be what you're cool with. All right. We're halfway there, guys, for this episode. We're going to be doing 10. We're going to be doing 10 out of the 30 games. And so far we've done 5. So only 5 more to go. And we're now quickly getting into like this game is good, kind of, with some caveats, with a lot of caveats. So we'll just go right into the next one. And this one is called Analog: A Hate Story. Now, I want to quickly preface this with a content warning, because we are going to be talking about some like relatively heavy topics, murder, and I get like, basically, I'll just come right out and say it, sexual activity involving someone under the age of consent. So if that's going to trigger you, that's fine. I want to make it very clear. Trigger is not a bad word. It's, bullshit that it's been turned into an anti-feminist thing. If it's going to bother you, just move on to the next one. You didn't hear me talk more about trails, spoilers, but yeah. So Analog Hate Story is a fun little, by fun I mean awful, little visual novel. It's essentially, I did talk about this when I first played it, alongside a main episode of the podcast. But essentially, it is about, you are an explorer from far off into the future, like very, very, very far off into the future, and you find a spaceship that is also from like our future. It is from the future relative to 2023, but compared to the character you are playing as, it is like pretty much an ancient relic. This is on a very, very long time frame away from where we are now. So that's kind of the premise. And everybody on board died and went missing or whatever. And you're trying to figure out what happened and why. So essentially you are presented with this scenario. And I am gonna spoil the whole game. So I'm just gonna, because I think it's important to talk about like what I thought of the game. And yeah, so if you have any interest in playing this for yourself, I'm just gonna be honest, it's not great. It's an okay game. I really like some of the ideas, but it's not, the execution leaves a lot to be desired. So listening to someone else talk about it might be the preferable way to experience it. I don't really know. I just know that I had never heard anyone talk about this game before, because I'm pretty sure it's relatively obscure. But all right. On to the spoilers. So essentially what you find out is that there is there are two AIs in the ship. I don't remember their names, but there's one who's like a blue-haired or black-haired girl, and then there's a blonde girl. So I'm just going to be referring to them as blue-haired girl and blonde girl. So you first start off with blue-haired girl, and you talk to her a little bit. You kind of get a sense of like what's going on the ship and the history of what was going on. Then at one point you have to shut her off to like access a different part of the ship, and you activate the other AI, the blonde-haired girl. And blonde-haired girl hates blue-haired girl, because it turns out that there's more here than meets the eye. So essentially, what you find out about life on the ship before everybody died is that it was an absurdly like feudalistic patriarchal society where like women were extraordinarily oppressed, like they like second class citizens. They had no rights. They were seen and not heard. Like it was completely male dominated. Very reminiscent of, again, like feudal era, like Europe and Japan and all that stuff. And you find out that blue-haired girl is not just an AI. She is an AI construct, or an AI reconstruction of the memories and personality of a girl who lived in that society. It turns out that at some point the spaceship left Earth, and all the people on it, were intended to live there for a very, very, very long time. It's not known what happened to her. It doesn't really matter. This girl was diagnosed with some kind of terminal illness. And so what they did was they cryo-froze her. Her parents said, we're going to put you in cryostasis. When you wake up, we're going to be gone. We're going to be dead. But they will probably have a cure for the disease you have. And she didn't really want to do it. I mean, she's very young. She's like, I think at the time they put her in cryosleep, but she's like 12 or 13. She doesn't really want to do it, but they convinced her to go along with it. Now, here's the problem, though. When they put her in the cryosleep, at some point after that, society did not progress to the point where they got that cure. Instead, they regressed a lot. Again, from like a society that seems to like mostly resemble our own. We don't really get a lot of details on that era of the spaceship, but the era that she is woken up in is just a complete, the patriarchal nightmare. And in fact, they don't wake her up to cure her disease at all. They wake her up so that she can be used as a bargaining chip, as like a marriage candidate in political maneuvers, and she has to spend the rest of her very short life, because she dies at 18 because of this terminal illness. She has to spend the rest of her very short life being a pawn in a extremely patriarchal society, and it's fucking brutal, man. And it is a really cool, in some ways, inversion of that trope of like, we're gonna wake you up when things are better, and usually the twist on that is like, oh, well, maybe the future is just as bad as the present or whatever. But no, they said, well, what if it was worse? What if it was like way, way, way worse? And that's what you have to deal with. Yeah, I mean, it's a neat idea. Really held back, unfortunately, by its execution. It really feels like at points they were going for shock value over anything else. And this is where, we talk about the content warning that I mentioned. It's all text based. It's all text logs that you're reading. There's nothing visual, thankfully. But it does spend some time talking about the fact that this at the time, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl, was forced into marriages. And then, of course, having sex and having children. Actually, I don't think she had children, but it's, and they don't spend a lot of time on that. Like, it definitely doesn't feel like fetishized at all, which is good. Otherwise, that would be like really gross. But it definitely feels like they spend more time on it than they really needed to. It's realistic, right? Because like they would talk about it. I don't know, the way they handle it, and I'm not going to get into the details, not because I care about spoiling, but because it's like honestly really gross. But you can play it for yourself if you really want to see some of that. It's not graphic. It's not like, and I don't think she's ever really like forced into it or anything. It's just kind of, it's hard to explain, but take my word for it. Executed pretty badly. Other thing that's worth mentioning is, as far as I can tell, I didn't really spend any time with the blonde-haired girl when I played. But blonde-haired girl, as far as I can tell, is an actual AI. But she was created during the period of time where, women were very subservient, and she is a female AI. So she is like, yes, that was based and epic, and she was bad for wanting to go against it. What you eventually find out is that she just fed up with everything and not wanting to go through with anything anymore. She killed everybody on the ship. She disabled the life support, and everybody on the ship died. And that's the story. And it's got some cool ideas, really rough execution in places, and I could not honestly say that I recommend it. But if you're interested, maybe watch like a playthrough or something. I'm pretty sure I got it for free, or again, I think on one of those bundle sites. But yeah, certainly was a game. It's not like I can even say that it was boring, because it was very, very interesting. It just has some stuff that I like really didn't like, and it kind of cancels out to just being kind of, hit or miss. But yeah, that's that game. Maybe look into it if you're interested. Oh, I completely I started that thought, but I didn't finish it. So the AI, the blonde-haired girl AI, there are 3 endings of the game. One where you, I guess there are like a few, but there are 3 like quote unquote good endings. One where you take both AIs, or like one or the other, and like upload them to your ship. And then you can like take them off, and basically you can marry the AI or whatever. You can do that for either of them, and then you can if you can get them to like reconcile their differences, you can actually take both of them. I left the blonde haired AI because she sucked and I hated her. But I took black hair girl with me because she was nice, and killing people who are oppressive, completely awful, disgusting human beings is actually based and cool. That's a joke for legal reasons. That is a joke. Yeah, that's I kind of went through it all. Fine game, worth definitely, I'm glad, more than some of the other games I've talked about so far, I am glad that I played Analog Hate Story, because it felt like a game that was like trying to say something, even if it failed, you know. And I think it was interesting in that regard. Okay, sorry guys, we gotta do this one more time. Back to Trails. Actually, one more time. Yeah, one more time this episode. This is the last one. Back to Trails. Now we are finally getting Trails of Cold Steel 3. So Trails of Cold Steel 3 is kind of interesting in a lot of ways, because it is very much in the era of the story, and by era I mean 2 games, Trails of Cold Steel 3 and Trails of Cold Steel 4, that, and I guess also 2, where you can tell they really just did not give a shit about the writing, or at least, like, if they were trying to, they were doing a very bad job. The characters are here more than ever just so bland cardboard cutouts. I'd say actually maybe more here than in Cold Steel 4, if you can believe it. Like, it's truly shocking how completely uninteresting all of these characters are. It introduces a new set of characters called New Class 7, which is much smaller than Old Class 7, which gives them more time to be in the spotlight. So you'd think, oh, okay, you know, maybe this is good. Maybe they're going somewhere good with this. The problem is that they, for whatever reason, they insist on having Old Class 7 also kind of, maybe not front and center, but like definitely still very important in the background. And like still relevant, like they still show up, they still join your party and do things like that. So it's they're not allowed to have like as much screen time as they would like, because all their screen time is also like, oh hey, remember Laura Arce? Do you remember Elliot Craig? Like, you like these guys because they're here again. It's like, all right, that's cool, but we already saw their story. We saw their story in Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. And they're still cool. You know, if they pop up every once in a while, that's fine. But like, I want to see what's going on with Kurt Vander. I want to see what's going on with Juna Crawford. You know, like these new guys. And some of them still manage to be good in spite of that. Ash Carbide is like the fucking best character in all of Trails, and he is introduced in this game and is like transcends. This is like a breath of fresh air among all these fucking nothing worthless characters. He's actually goddamn interesting. Altina Orion is important in this game, and she's great. I love her. But for the most part, just boring nothingness for the whole game. Now, what does this game do better than 4 and 2, which is why I have it up higher than them? Well, for one thing, it brings back the school setting, which was in Trails of Cold Steel 1. I don't actually think it's as interesting in this game. Personally, I like the random NPC students a little bit less. Some of them are pretty good, but on the whole, on average, I would say the ones in Trails of Cold Steel 1 are better. But I still like that vibe, that atmosphere. I think Reen as a teacher is pretty cool. And he, you know, getting to like lead a new generation of students. If there was maybe a little bit more of a time skip, I think that would be better, because Reen is only like a year out of school, so it feels a little bit weird, but you know, it is what it is. Some cool ideas there. And I have to say, as the story goes on, in my opinion, it starts to actually get pretty good. There's some mystery elements that are introduced that don't actually have a very good payoff, but they are still there, and they are still interesting. And I would have to say, other than Trails in the Sky second chapter, which is the only game in the series that has like a proper conclusive ending, this has my favorite ending in the entire series. Even better than first chapter. I think the end of this game is so fucking cool. Like, everything from like the first kind of like fake out final dungeon all the way up to the actual proper end of the game is really cool, and has so many awesome moments. The end credits theme it's called Morning Refrain. Morning as in MOURNING. Fucking peak. So good. The last cutscene is amazing. The final boss is so cool. I love everything about the ending of this game. Well, not everything. Almost everything about the ending of this game. But yeah, they what's the opposite of fumbled? They kind of salvaged it at the last minute, for me, or like the kind of like the last third of the story. Things actually start to pick up and get a little bit interesting, but yeah, so that's kind of why I have it a little bit higher. But it really it suffers from all those same problems, and I'm not going to spend too much more time on it just because we've already all been here. But it's a decent game. It is definitely a step up from the other two that I've talked about so far. I would go as far as to say that I actually like this game. It's just not that great. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Okay, now we're going to get into the really hot takes, because some of these games that I'm coming up on are beloved, and both. Oh no, wait, when did this game come out? Not the one I'm about to talk about. Hold on, I'm looking at something else. Okay, this came out in 2022. Okay, yeah. So never mind. Anyway, completely off topic. That is not the game that I'm about to talk about. I'll stop beating around the bush, I guess, and just say that next up I have Super Metroid. I played Super Metroid for the first time this year, and it is a good game. And I want to reiterate that, at this point, we are just getting into various flavors of good. Like Trails of Cold Steel 3 was pretty much the last game where I was like, this is okay. And everything else from here is like, this is good, I would say. It's just not great. I do like Super Metroid. I don't think it's my favorite Metroid game. In fact, I guess just kind of like empirically, it's probably my least favorite Metroid game. That's not really saying anything though, because I haven't played very many of them. The only other ones I've played are Zero Mission, Fusion, and Prime 1. Oh, and Dread. So I've played a good chunk of the series. And Super Metroid being my least favorite does not mean anything negative about its quality. It is a very good game. I understand how influential it was in game design. Please don't come for me. Whoever, anyone who's made a video essay on game design on YouTube has talked about Super Metroid at some point. Everyone knows how good and important Super Metroid was. So hopefully you'll spare me if I don't lecture you guys about it. But basically, it's just iconic. It came up with so many cool ideas, so many interesting game design ideas that are still being recycled both in the series and outside of it to this day. Really fucking good game. That's really all I have to say about it. And the only thing that's really holding it back and making it not as good for me is that it is an SNES game that kind of has it hasn't aged very well in that regard. I like older games. I don't dislike older games necessarily, but I think the controls do not always age well, and I think especially for like games that rely a lot on precise shooting or precise platforming, that age can show. I'm trying to remember what I even played this on. I think it was it just a SNES emulator? I think so. Probably. Yeah, anyway, very fun game. I don't have much to say about it. Having it this low on the list does not mean I don't like it. It's just I think the only reason Zero Mission and Metroid and Zero Mission and Fusion I like more. I only like them more because the controls have aged better, and they feel a little bit more fluid, a little bit more, tight, I guess. Like, the controls are tighter. I think if this game ever got, it would have needed to get one a long time ago, because now they're just going to update it and make it look all 3D, and it's just not going to be, I don't think it's going to be as good. I think this game really would have benefited from a GBA remake, and I'm honestly shocked that they've never remade this game. And it's genuinely very weird to me that they haven't. Not that I'm complaining, I think anytime you go and look at the game design on a game like this, you risk fucking it up. But I think just to update it and give it like slightly better controls, I think it would have been cool to see a remake of this game at some point. We probably still will at some point, but I don't think it's gonna be the same. All right, closing in, second to last game we're talking about this time. This one is really, really cute. I actually don't even remember how I heard about this game, but I found out about it, and I ordered the special edition just because it came with a little art book. I'm getting ahead of myself. I should probably talk about what game I'm actually talking about here. It's called The Liar Princess and the Blind Prince. I don't think it is a very well known or talked about game. I've never ever heard anyone talk about it. I just saw that I just happened upon it one day, and it was there was like a special edition, and the art style, like, you look up pictures from this game, like, is a really beautiful art style. It's basically a puzzle platformer, and it's a little janky. Like, the platforming is not always great. The puzzles are not always very, they're certainly not very complex. I think the best way to describe this is that it's like a children's storybook in video game form. And I mean that both from the art style and the music, but also the story is a very, like, it has that fairy tale vibe of, like, a very clear theme, a relatable protagonist who makes a mistake and has to, like, fix it by the end. And in terms of accessibility, is an extremely easy game, which is not a bad thing. I really think that you could have a child play this as their first ever video game, and it would go well. Okay, you know what? It was published by NIS America, which is the same company that publishes the Trails games now, unfortunately. It used to be Xseed, and Xseed was way better, but NISA does them now, and I think, they published this one, and that's probably how I heard about it. I have the special edition. It came with the art book. It came with a it's not an art book. It literally has a fairy tale book inside of it. Like, I don't know who made this game. Let me see. Nippon Ichi Software. Wait, no, is that the publisher or is that the developer? Yeah, I think that's the publisher or the developer. Do they do anything else that's noteworthy? I don't really see anything. Yeah. Overall, I just think it's a really cute little game. It literally has a fairy tale book in the limited edition of the game. And it feels like they put a lot of passion and effort into this game. Maybe not effort, maybe that's the wrong word, but just like charm. It has so much soul, and I hate that it gets thrown around like crazy, but that's really the best way I can think to describe it. Is it just has a lot of soul. I might honestly look into more from this publisher, because I think I'm a fan. I think I'm officially a fan of or this developer rather. I think I'm officially a fan of this group, but we'll see. Some of their stuff looks very different, so I don't know if it'll all be like, I don't know if there's anything that they have that's the same, but yeah. Okay. Liar Princess and Blind Prince, pretty fun game. I'd recommend checking it out. I don't know how much you can even buy it for now. Let's see if I can find it on, like, Amazon. Okay, so it's on the eShop. It's $20. It doesn't even look like it comes with, holy shit, $300. Wait, hold on. maybe I'm gonna sell this. Maybe we're gonna sell the limited edition. Yeah, it looks like if you want this game physical, then you're gonna have to pay an arm and a leg for the special edition. That I will be selling. Not actually. I'm probably gonna keep it, but you can also buy it digitally. It's only $20. So, all right. We're doing all right on time. I'm very glad I decided to break this up into 3 episodes, because we're already at an hour on my end, and we're only just now finishing. Thankfully, the last one that I have to talk about is really not. It's not gonna take me very long, because it's Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby, despite being my namesake in some ways, I have not played very many Kirby games. I have played exactly 3, I think. I played Nightmare in Dreamland. That was my very first one. And then I played the original Kirby, Kirby's Dream Land, I think. And then I played this just this year. And overall, I have to say, I'm a pretty big fan of Kirby. I think he's cute. I think the game design is usually pretty fun. I had a lot of fun going through the levels in this game, and just generally, trying to get through, and just like it's Kirby, like, what do you want from me? It's a good game. If you've never played a Kirby game before, this is a really good place to start. It is the only game in the series that is like this, where it's kind of like a 3D environment, more instead of like a 2D side scroller. I'm pretty sure it's the only game that's like that. Maybe there are more, but I'm pretty sure they're basically all 2D side scrollers for the most part. But anyway, overall, very good game. And I think it was a great way to end this first section. So next time we're going to be talking about that was number 21. So we're going to be talking about numbers 20 through 11. And I can't wait to do that because that's going to be fun. Let me just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to some of the games I'm going to be talking about next time. And then of course when we eventually get to the top 10. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited to talk about those games. So yeah, that's going to be all from me for this time. If you're interested in checking out any of the games that I talked about today, definitely, if you're not sure where to get them, you can always tweet me at IMayMeleeKirby, or look into them yourselves. And I'd honestly, other than like everything from Trails of Cold Steel 2 down, I don't recommend. But like Telling Lies and Up. Are all games that I think are at the very least worth giving a chance, because I think they were pretty fun. So anyway, that's all from me. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.